And we begin our conversation today with State Senator Kelda Roys, a Democrat from Madison. Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Great to be with you.
I want to start by talking about that there sort of continues to be relatively little movement on the state budget, with child care funding playing a big role in that. I mean, the governor has said that he will not sign a budget without some form of extending the child care credits. Why do you think this funding has continued to be such a contentious issue?
I think it's because child care is so essential for our economy. We have a workforce shortage in Wisconsin, and that's going to be exacerbated if we lose child care providers who are really in a very, very dire state right now. The only thing that is keeping the doors open at thousands of providers across the state has been this Child Care Counts program that provides funding directly to providers to help bridge that gap between the cost of providing care and what parents can afford to pay. Parents just can't afford to pay more, and this money is needed or we're going to lose our providers. Yeah.
What do you say to some of the Republican proposals like tax credits or loan for child care providers that they believe could be a real solution to this sort of thing? Why do you feel like that is not the approach to child care funding?
Well, if those things are going to be successful, it's going to take many, many years for them to get off the ground. And you have to kind of get businesses to buy in and say, well, we make widgets, but actually we're also going to run a child care center on the side. To me, we have a solution that we know works, that has kept kids in care and parents in the workforce and helped enhance the education for our youngest Wisconsinites. Why are we trying to throw that program in the garbage when we know that that's what's working and this is an urgent problem? Childcare is infrastructure. It's just as important to our economy as roads and bridges.
Are there any places where you kind of feel with those Republican proposals where there could be opportunities to find common ground?
You know, I'm always looking for, are there ways that we can partner together, and really trying to listen carefully about, what's being offered. But unfortunately, too much of it, what I see from the Republicans is efforts to deregulate and make things less safe for kids. And I don't think, as a parent, I certainly don't want that. Things that really don't get at the root of the problem here, which is a supply problem. We have classrooms that are sitting empty because the people who have the degrees in early childhood education cannot afford to work for the poverty wages that are earned in this field. And that is why we need public funds to help bridge that gap.
You've described childcare as critical infrastructure. I think if you ask any parent, they realize what a challenge this is. People who maybe aren't parents or no longer have, young children may not realize the level that this issue is at. I mean, how do you kind of increase public perception and understanding of kind of the broad impact that this has in the state?
Yeah, I think about when I had my first child about 12 years ago, and I was on a waiting list for a year and a half at a center to be able to get infant care. So it was before I was pregnant that I got on that waiting list. I paid about $1,300 a month, maybe $1,400 a month for her care as an infant. Now for my most recent child who's in daycare, when he was born 3 years ago, the cost was over $2,000 a month. And had I not had siblings and was already on that waiting list, there was no way I would have been able to get him care until he was about 2. So there's a huge, huge shortage. Over the last 20 years, we've lost more than half of our providers in this state. Child Care Counts, these direct payments to providers, is what has stopped those closures and stopped that loss. It's just stopping the bleeding, but we really need to continue that, or we're going to continue to see the loss of child care slots around the state.
Do you sort of eye what other places are doing, things that have worked, things that have not worked great in other states? I mean, is it interesting because states are, to some degree, up to their own on some of these things? And is it interesting for yourself and party leaders and other folks to kind of eye that?
Yeah, for me, I'm always interested in learning what's working well in other states. I have a lot of colleagues around the country. And what's interesting is that in some states, even Republican states, you have Republicans recognizing that this is a problem, and they are offering public funds and public subsidies to child care centers and those teachers and providers, because they recognize that it's a supply problem. We know deregulation doesn't work. It makes our kids less safe. Families don't want to leave their kids in a place that they don't feel is going to be safe or enriching for them. And beyond that, we know that every dollar we put into early childhood is going to pay the most dividends out of any other investment we can make. 90% of brain development happens in those first birth to 3 years. So even before kids get to school, we can set them on a path of success so that they'll have the freedom to do whatever they want and thrive.
If this doesn't get addressed, we know that there are ongoing challenges with just finding workers in industries in general. And if childcare remains so expensive, I imagine it can create de-incentivize some parents from saying, well, maybe I will just stay home instead of work because I can't make enough money to pay for this. Are there long-term economic impacts on that? Yeah,
this would be disastrous for our economy if we can't get more funding for childcare, because parents will have to drop out of the workforce. Even if parents who can afford care, if there aren't the slots available, it doesn't matter in some sense how much money you have, because there just aren't going to be the slots. So we're going to lose people. Parents are going to lose the careers that they've spent years building. But more broadly, we're already seeing millennials and Gen Z choosing not to have kids, or having fewer kids than they want, than their ideal family would be, because of the cost of childcare. And to me, that is the saddest thing in the world, to think that somebody's dreams of their family is not going to be met because Republicans didn't care enough to solve this problem with us.
Well, State Senator Kelda Roys, a Democrat from Madison, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.